right, so this is the Meraki Espresso Machine, and what Meraki is trying to do with this, it's very ambitious. And whether or not they can actually pull it off, I think is another question. But it does make me very hopeful, kind of in general. More on that later. This espresso machine crams in a ton of features that are normally found only in much more expensive machines. But before we get into the machine, I do want to pull back the curtain a little bit here, because Kickstarter launches, new companies, new products, it's all very high pressure, and you're never really totally sure how it's gonna go. So I'm gonna give you as much transparency here as I can. I connected with Meraki. They offered to send me this unit, which is a prototype. Any of the units that you will see on YouTube as of right now, they're all prototypes. Now, I told Meraki, hey, I would love to review this. Here's all the tests that I would normally run on an espresso machine. And they were actually pretty upfront. They said, yeah, our production model is actually going to perform significantly better in several of these tests. Would you be interested in 2 units? So I asked my audience on Instagram and I said, hey, do you want a first look video with the prototype followed up by a full review? And you guys said yes. So here we are. Once I get a full review model, I am going to be following up this video with one with a lot more detailed testing, and I'll also drop my testing regimen in the description too. If there is still something that you want to know, or something that I didn't answer, or something that I can answer in my follow-up video, drop it down below. And I will also link my full review of the production unit here once it's available too. Okay. So this is a dual boiler all-in-one espresso machine, meaning it's got a grinder over here, it's got separate boilers for espresso brewing, that being right here, and another boiler for steam. It's got a reservoir back here, both boilers are stainless steel, and it's also got this little screen up here to control the machine, several manual controls on here as well. It also comes with this little tamping station, I guess. This is super cheap feeling, but the actual tamper feels fantastic. And it comes with this little spin type distributor. Comes with a portafilter as well, and a little milk pitcher. This is 11 ounces. Now, a couple highlights that right off the bat made this machine very interesting for me. Number one, it's got a rotary pump, and that's something that you don't often see until you get into machines that are very expensive. It's a higher quality type of pump, several advantages to it. This machine has one of them. Also, it has PID or temperature control, which is fantastic. The grinder, this caught my attention too, is in collaboration with Timemore. Timemore's done a lot in the grinder space. I've tested a lot of their grinders. Great company there too, so to see that connection was very good. Also, grind by weight and brew by weight. And both of those are, in my opinion, pretty big deals, and we're going to come back to them later. It's also got both automated and manual brew modes, so depending on how much automation you want, it can kind of cover the spectrum there. We'll come back to that. The Kickstarter price for this machine starts at $1,100, and there's going to be a couple tiers as time goes on there. MSRP is going to be closer to $1,800. We're going to talk a little bit more about that price point later. If they can sort out some issues here, the Kickstarter price is very aggressive for the feature set. But if you decide to back this machine, you're also assuming some risk there that this new company is going to be able to deliver in the end and everything that they say they're going to. Okay, so size-wise, this is a pretty big espresso machine. It's about 37 centimeters wide, 37 centimeters deep, and depending on how this is, 41 to 42 centimeters tall. So you're going to want to make sure that wherever you're planning on putting this, that it would actually fit there. Finish-wise, most things on the outside are plastic. This is metal right here, the drip tray. This is metal right here. The group is metal, but a lot of the casing, the reservoir, the top, the screen, it's all plastic housing. Now, before we kind of start diving into each of the individual components here, I do have to say up here, these user interfaces on espresso machines, they're almost universally really bad. And this one is refreshingly almost intuitive and easy to use. You know, it's a prototype and there's some funny spelling mistakes in there, but on the whole, it's quite nice, actually. You have these 3 little circles here for the grinder, the brew boiler, and the steam boiler. Both the boilers, the ring around the outside will kind of move around as it warms up. Super intuitive. If it's out of water, it'll just flash a little water droplet there on the bottom. Again, it just seems like when you look at it, you kind of can just figure it out just by using it, which is really nice. You can swipe down for other settings, including cleaning mode, Wi-Fi, date time, timed preheating. Also it will do scale mode, or hot water mode is in here as well. And if you have like bean settings loaded in, you can hit this bean reset button to kind of reset all of your settings. And this is kind of cool. They sent me a couple bags of coffee, and they have a little RFID tag on the bottom here. And when you touch that to the top of the machine, it will make a little chime, and it will load up settings for you to brew whatever that coffee is to their spec. That's fantastic. How they're going to onboard roasters, or if they're just going to sell their own coffee into that, I don't really have any idea, but it is pretty cool. You can swipe up and get a little bit of detail on the coffee that you're using. And when you go into each of the settings, it will indicate kind of the right setting with a star. And if you are on that setting, it will do a solid star. And if you're not currently on that setting, it will do an outline star. And then you can just go into it and adjust it until it's right, and then the star will fill in. I didn't need to even look at the manual to figure out any of that because it is very intuitive to use. When you're ready to brew or steam, if you want to do it with the screen, you can just click the play button, or you can do it with these manual controls here too. Okay, let's talk about each of the components, starting with the grinder. This is what's called an on-demand integrated grinder that, again, they've done in collaboration with Timemore. Now, I own several Timemore grinders, electric grinders and hand grinders. This one is called a Chestnut hand grinder, and specifically it's their ESP model. And when I took this hand grinder apart, it was not exactly the same, but it was almost exactly the same burr set that I found in here. Very, very close. It favors more of a higher body traditional style espresso shot as opposed to a very high clarity low body shot. This one comes with this kind of nifty, this auto closing removable hopper. So this just kind of closes when you take it off, meaning you can get in there and take out the burr, clean it to a certain degree a little bit more easily. That was nice. It's also got a deionizer in here to keep the static down. This is super cool. Grind by weight, a little scale right here. You got this little metal dosing cup here too, this magnetic platform, and this little silicone thing to make cleaning a little bit easier. We'll actually weigh the grinds as they're coming out. That's a big deal because most grinders like this will be controlled by time. So as you're adjusting the grind, 10 seconds on this setting might not produce the same amount of coffee as 10 seconds on this setting over here. This will make sure that whatever your grind setting, it's going to spit out the right weight of coffee. And that really makes the whole process a lot more intuitive because it's one variable that you don't even need to think about. Now, there are only a handful of other grind by weight grinders even available for the home market at this point. It is really nice to have that feature. Sound-wise, it's about 75 to 77 decibels, so pretty reasonable. All right, so I was aiming for 19 grams there. It says on here 19.3, and here it says 19.3, so about 0.3 grams heavy. That was pretty typical. One thing I don't love is you can control the brew boiler and the steam manually. There's no way to trigger the grinder manually. You have to use the screen. Now, when I did my first couple grinds, I found there was about just over a gram of coffee retained in there. So retention, exchange, somewhere around a gram. Also the ionizer inside, make sure all the grounds are nice and fluffy, static free. There's no static in this cup, so that's great too. The motor is 150 watts. And again, I didn't stress test this one. I will stress test the production one. All right, let's talk about the brew group, which is actually what is gonna make the espresso. The actual group head itself is made of aluminum, and apparently that's going to get adjusted to stainless steel. It doesn't feel the nicest. I don't know if you can hear that, but it kind of feels like it's grinding a little bit in there. Apparently that'll get better with the new stainless group head. The actual boiler itself is stainless though, and this is kind of cool. The portafilter itself, I wish more companies did this, again, very thoughtful touch, is convertible. So this just pops in and out. So if you don't need to worry about a spout, or you want to do bottomless, or you don't want to worry about the time to heat up the spout, you don't need to use it. You can just pop it out. Several other reviewers got earlier versions of this with a plastic handle that I saw broke. I haven't had any issues like that. I did try several aftermarket portafilters for E61 style 58mm groups, and none of them fit. Couldn't get one of them to fit. So only the Meraki portafilter will fit. I did test the pressure at the group with something called a press sensor that I use to track and measure pressure. And it was measuring at about 10 bar on a blank basket. So once you get a puck in there and you start running in water, it'll probably peak, just over 9 bars. So that's about where you want. Now there's no way to adjust that pressure, which would be really nice on a rotary pump. So there's that. Also, there's no pre-infusion on this, although apparently they're planning on adding it for the next version. So I will circle back on that for you. You can adjust the temperature. So if you want to try a higher or a lower temperature, then you have the flexibility to do that. And again, this has a brew by weight scale, so that as it's pulling espresso, it's going to be measuring the output and then cutting it off at the right time. Sound wise, also, it's not the nicest sounding pump, but it is pretty quiet. All right, so that ran a little fast, and it's 1 gram heavier than it read on the scale. And that brings up something I do want to mention about the grinder. Now, again, apparently this is something that's going to be updated, but I found I was like on the very fine end of the grinder. Some decafs I couldn't actually grind fine enough to suit the decaf. So I think there needs to be some calibration there, because I really was on the very tight end of the grind range, and it just felt like it could be calibrated a little better. Now, this brew by weight, I really love this. Most machines in this price range, if they even have an automation like that, will use something called volumetrics. They measure the water going into the espresso puck rather than the water coming out. And that's a lot less accurate because different coffees will retain different amounts of water. So the fact that this has brew by weight and grind by weight, it's a big mark for this machine in my opinion. Now, as far as measurements on this, in addition to the 10 bar pressure on a blank basket, I did find a 2 to 3 degree offset between what the PID read and what my temperature probes were reading at the group. Not unusual at all. However, when I did back-to-back shots really quickly, I would start to notice a temperature fall off. So that's something that I'm going to be testing on the final production unit in a little bit higher level of detail, but just be aware on the prototype. Now, as far as warm up, you can brew with it after as little as like 2 minutes. It will be like, okay, we're warm and good. At that point, I was still about 10 degrees too cool on my espresso. So after leaving it for more like 10 minutes, that's when I found I was able to get a very stable temperature on a shot of espresso. Also, the scale has like that silicone pad, and that will actually funnel hot water off of the scale and into the main drip tray. So I like that a lot. And one thing that I'm an especially big fan of, I'm a big Americano guy. I know Americanos can be a little polarizing. And if you want Americano or hot water, you can just swipe down, and there's a little nozzle right behind the group that will shoot hot water in directly. Super nice. Now again, you can see the temperature going down there, and that's because this is a 350 mil boiler. So depending on how much water you're gonna suck out of that boiler, again, you're gonna have a temperature fall off issue as that boiler gets filled up with cold water. But the taste, very good, very rich. This is a Brazilian, fantastic cup of coffee. Very good. Now, before we move on to the steam boiler, the only other thing that I want to add is, in addition to using the screen here on the brew boiler, you can also use this to turn it on manually. This little paddle feels cheap and terrible, but apparently it's getting updated to aluminum on the next version, so we'll sit tight for that. Steam boiler. This is a 550 mil stainless boiler. You can run it manually, just like that brew boiler with this paddle right here. or you can run it in an automated way using this right here. Now I ran it on strong and I found it had plenty of power. I could steam about 8 ounces of milk in just under 30 seconds, so that was fantastic. I also find it's like a very dry steam, so you're not getting a lot of water spitting out, which is really good. It's a cool touch steam wand, 3-hole tip. Just a note, this is cool touch. This down here is not cool touch. So I caught myself there a couple times. Now, what's really cool is there is a little temperature probe right here. So that can either, number one, tell you how hot your milk is as you're steaming, just as kind of an FYI. I just go by feel most of the time. But you can also just fill up your pitcher with milk, stick this in, and hit play. So I'll show you how this works. Don't mind my Canadian milk pitcher here. And I'm just gonna put this here. I'm gonna put the steam wand in, and I'm gonna click the steam setting, and I'm just gonna hit play. And just with the design of it, it's gonna let a little bit of air into there to kind of start frothing it up. If you put it on a little bit of an angle, it'll create a bit better of a vortex. And there we go, all done. Now, one thing that I did notice is that when I would go to purge afterwards, see this? Milk gets kind of caught in here. And when you go to purge, it will like spray it all over your drip tray and on your machine. So just be aware of that, I guess. But the milk texture, even on that automated steaming, is, I'll be honest, it's better than I expected. Last thing I want to mention, even if you clean it regularly, and it's even done it right here, I cleaned the steam wand, but right around this probe, a little bit of milk will hang out, and you really have to watch to clean that properly, or it's going to get really gross. So that's just something that you're going to have to watch as you're cleaning and maintaining your machine. Overall, you can use it with all that automated stuff, or you can use it basically fully manually and have a very nice hands-on experience of making espresso. Other more automated espresso machines like this kind of distance you a lot more from the process. Like they will grind into the portafilter and then tamp right there, and you don't really have to do anything. This keeps a nice element of making coffee, but makes it a lot easier to learn and approach. All right, so as far as updates go from this machine to the actual production version, I have them written down. I'm just gonna tell you what they are. First, they're planning on releasing a white model. On the grinder, they're gonna make some adjustments to the grinder range. So some of that calibration stuff that I mentioned. This is also stepped right now. So you have like little clicks in between each setting, and apparently they're going to move that to a stepless setup. Also, this little piece right here is currently aluminum. That's going to get changed to stainless. Apparently they're going to add low pressure pre-infusion to the brew. That's fantastic and something that I was very much hoping to see on this machine from day one, so I was very encouraged to see that. The group head here, they're going to change this. This is currently aluminum. They're going to change it to stainless. That should make this whole feel a lot smoother, look a little bit nicer too over time, I'm sure. These paddles up here, these cheap feeling things, they're going to change that to aluminum, and they're also going to make several tooling and quality changes to the overall fit and finish of the machine. Now, if they can actually do all that at the Kickstarter price, this is a pretty aggressively positioned setup. Now, is it worth it at the MSRP of $1,800? The main thing that I have seen from people who they're considering the price point of $1,800 is the amount of plastic. It's very plasticky. It feels plasticky, it sounds plasticky, it's plasticky as you're touching it. It does have metal touch points, which is great, but it's a lot of plastic. And that is a fair point and something that you'll need to consider if you're considering backing this or paying the full price for it. Now, I'm gonna finish this up by telling you something that I really, really love about this machine, but giving you a list of things that you will potentially find annoying is something that I always do, because if you're gonna go out and drop a lot of money on an espresso machine, I don't ever want you to be surprised by something that an online reviewer forgot to say. So again, I got my list written down. I'm just gonna give it to you and let you decide if any of these things are deal breakers or not. Number one, the size. It's big, and you're gonna need to figure out if it will actually fit where you want. Worth considering here is if you wanna do that RFID thing, actually fitting a bag in over top and putting it on the reader here, that takes even more height. The paddles. I really want to see where they go with these paddles, because if you want to brew manually, you're going to use these paddles and they feel really bad. So I'm curious to see what they do with that. The portafilter. To me, it seems like other portafilters are just a little bit wider in the ears. The baskets all seem to fit, and you can swap them around, but the ears on this are just a little narrower, and it prevents other portafilters from fitting in there. So an adjustment there would be really nice. Cleaning. There's a lot of nooks and crannies on this, and especially with, when you're purging your milk wand, you're gonna get splatters on stuff, and there's like a lot of little areas like behind the brew group where you're going to get dust, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult to clean. This drip tray slides out. There's a little float in here that tells you when it's full. It's got a very large capacity. That's great. I was finding that the spaces in between the grates would collect a lot of both milk and coffee and was very difficult to clean. Also, when you're putting it back together, the tolerances on the drip tray specifically are very tight, so it is kind of tricky to get back together. On that note, the milk kind of getting sucked up in the steam wand and getting stuck in there, and you have to purge it out after. I don't love that. Would love to see more accuracy in the scales. The grind range on the grinder, I definitely didn't love being so tight down to here and feeling like some coffees I couldn't grind fine enough. Also, I was finding there was some inconsistency shot to shot. So would love to see some improvements to the calibration there, and it sounds like that's coming. That temperature stability stuff, I'm gonna retest that, but I'm just gonna say wait for my full review before you make up your mind onto how temperature stable it actually is. The fact that there's no pressure adjustment on the actual pump itself, if you wanna try dropping the pressure to 6 bar and run turbos, you just don't have that option. It would be nice to see that. No plumb-in. Plumb-in is something that can really make a home espresso machine way more convenient. Rotary pumps especially are very well suited to plumb-ins, and to not have an option to plumb it in, I think it's a missed opportunity. I would love to see that. Pre-infusion. Was disappointed when I realized it didn't have it. Really happy to see that they're going to be including that in the production model. This screen up here, I think there are some unknowns about whether or not this is actually going to be able to prove itself over the long term. Now, you can do certain things manually, but if this were to ever fail, you would lose a lot of functionality, and there's no way to trigger the grinder manually. So that's something that I see as being a risk. And lastly, just overall longevity in general. This is a new project, new company, and their ability to execute on this project. I think that is still an unknown. I am hopeful that they can do it. And what I will say, to Meraki's credit, is they have been incredibly receptive to feedback. If you are considering backing this, you're not already in their Facebook group, you can see that they are very engaged and listening to feedback of people who are considering buying this machine. That being said, there is a very long list of updates that they are planning on making, having various stages of execution and things that they want to do to deliver for the production model. And they want to design, tool, manufacture, test, and deploy all of those changes in a high volume in a very short amount of time. Especially for a new company, that is something that is very difficult to do. Can they do it? I hope they can. Will they do it? That is a risk of large Kickstarter campaigns. Here's what I love about the ambition of this project and what makes me very hopeful overall. Breville has absolutely dominated this market segment for a very long time. They make great machines, they have a ton of reps, they have a ton of credibility, and so many people have got their start in espresso by using a Breville machine. There has not been anybody in the rear view of Breville who is trying to leapfrog what they're doing in terms of offering new features at a comparable price. And I think that heat on Breville for somebody trying to do something extremely ambitious is a really good thing for home enthusiasts overall, because it means that there is more people competing to create the best product that you want to spend your money on. It's all something that pushes the industry forward in a good way. Now again, when I get the production model of this machine, I am going to run a huge battery of tests on it because you guys are banging down my door to get more information about this thing. Rather than read out what all those tests are, I'm gonna drop them in the description, so have a look, and if there's a test that you feel like is missing or you want a result from, drop it in the comments. If I have the equipment and the resources to run it, I will. In the meantime, I want to hear what you think about the Meraki. Let me know if you think this is going to be a huge Kickstarter flop or if this is the start of more change, innovation, and competition in the home coffee industry. I hope your next cup of coffee is fantastic. Subscribe and come back for that full production review, and we'll see you next time.